Tracking. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. We have Jake Ryks in the house today, in the studio. Jake, thanks for coming in, man.
My pleasure.
Jake is a full-time firefighter of roughly about 10 years now at St. Paul, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then host of the Hazard podcast, Hazard Class podcast.
There it is. Yeah. Hazard Class podcast.
I got it right.
Yeah. Good for you.
I got it right as a veteran of the show. Jake, you've had a storied career in a short period of time, if you ask me. You've got a recipient of the 2024 Minnesota Firefighter of the Year, correct?
Yep.
And then the Firehouse Magazine National Medal of Valor.
Yep. That was just a thing that we got just, a couple weeks ago now.
I want to hear all about it. Tell me about that fire.
Yeah. So that was February 3rd, 2024. It's weird. It feels like yesterday. I can remember like everything, the sights, the sounds, the smells from it, but also it feels like it was 1,000 years ago. But yeah, so I was working a shift trade. So in our on our department, I'm going to work for you, you work for me. Instead of using a vacation day, I wasn't even working my normal shift with my normal crew. I was just working.
Really?
Right? Yeah. And so, kind of an, unproductive day, just kind of random day. And then, at 1:30 in the morning, this fire comes out and it's close to us. We're not first in on it, but we're really close to first in, just a few seconds behind the first engine that got there. And, we get reports that there's people in there potentially. And you don't know how good the reports are, but you always want to be geared up for whatever
the worst,
it might be.
Right?
Yeah.
First intel is always wrong, right? First reports.
For sure. And so we get there. I'm on the opposite side. We run 5 people on our rescue squads, and I'm on the opposite side of the address. So generally, the middle person and the person on the left would take a hose and go in. The person on the right would work on forcible entry to the home, right? So I come around the corner from the front of the engine from the squad. And smoke rolling out. It wasn't a crazy huge fire, but there was definitely, there's obviously a fire, and you could see it in the front room. There's some flames and whatnot. I get up to the front door to force it. Door force is like butter, no big deal at all. Right at the time, there was this perfect moment. I forced the door, and over the radio, you hear like there's an open line in the house. Sounds like people are inside, right? So I'm like, oh shit.
What does an open line mean?
So that would be like the 911 caller like drops the phone. Okay. They're no longer talking to dispatch, but the phone is open. They can hear noise in the environment.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. So like open line, they can hear people in the house, right? So, and so I look back and I see these people, I trust, deploying a hose line. At this point, generally, you can go in front of the hose search generally, but you're working with a partner and. But I kind of make this decision to go, I'm going to go a little rogue here. And it's since been supported by our administration, which is super cool of them because some other fire departments aren't so aggressive and, people have been disciplined for similar acts. But so I look back and go, I'm going to go in and see what I can do here. Before there's a hose line, I'm just going to go into the burning building, just me by myself. But the reality is just like something in your career is like, yes, it's quote unquote a scary thing, but like, this is what we train for. It's just doing the thing that it's my job to do, right? I didn't feel like some momentous, I'm going to go do this heroic act. It was just like, this is what needs to happen. And this is what I've been training for the last 10 years to do.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, right? And so I pop in the front door. I make that decision to go in, knowing full well that the people behind me, they're working on getting hose line. They'll be watering, in a minute or so. I go in. I navigate the home. I immediately run into a couch. I kind of peel off to the right. I run into a divider for the kitchen, which tells me, all right, I know that I have a kitchen in the front right corner of the house. That means that I probably have bedrooms in the back of the house. Fire's off to the left of the front living room area. So if you walked into the house, there's a couch and then a living room. Off to your right is a kitchen. There's a central hallway down to the back of the house. And then there's bedrooms that kind of twist around that hallway.
And how big a house are we talking here? We said like ballpark square footage. It's it's 2 stories, 3 stories, single story.
It's a walkout house, which I'll get into why that was the problem. But It's a walkout house. It probably the main level is maybe 1,200 square feet.
Okay,
maybe it's a single story, but it has a basement. Right?
Roger.
But it's a walkout, so all these bedrooms are suspended off the ground. So in St. Paul, it's very common to not a lookout basement or a walkout basement rather is uncommon in the city. So, but what happened is that fire developed in the front room, and then they were just trapped in the back, right? Because all their windows were above grade, right? So So I get in, I recognize there's a kitchen, so I know I got to go to the back to find the bedrooms. I assume that's where the people are. It's 1:30 in the morning. That's where people generally are at 1:30 in the morning. So I make the decision I'm going to go past the fire into this back hallway. As I kind of move towards that, I'm like, it's starting to heat up. In my brain, I remember very distinctly being like, okay, you're by yourself. Is this a good choice? Because it's getting hotter, right? It's getting hotter. And I pass that initial room into the hallway, the central hallway, and then it cools down. I can feel the temperature come down a bit. So I'm like, okay, because you don't know at that point, it's pitch black. I mean, you're talking like hand in front of your face, you can't see anything, right? So I'm like, either I'm going to hit this hallway and it's going to keep getting hotter, or it's going to cool down because the fire's in the front and there's just smoke in the back.
I mean, you're operating by feel.
Totally. And it's just having been in however many fires prior to that, you're like, okay, I've been here. Is this getting better or worse based on what I'm feeling, right? So I go to that left bedroom, which would be the bedroom that shares a wall with the room that's on fire. And I start my search. I go around, find a closet, find a window, and then I eventually hit a bed. So I'm going through this bed. I'm reaching, and I finally touch something, and it stuck with me for a while because you're touching things, and if you close your eyes and you touch stuff, you can tell what's real, what's living, and what's not. And all of a sudden, it was, hard surface. That's not a chair or a blanket or a pillow. That's a thing.
Wow.
And I remember my initial thought, for whatever reason, it doesn't make sense even now. I remember being like, I think it's a dog. I remember very distinctly being like, why would I think it's a dog? Like, we had reports there were people in the house. Why would I think it's a dog? But I remember very distinctly being like, oh, it's a dog. And then I reached forward again, and it wasn't. It was a kid. And so I scooped the kid up, and I made my way to the front door. And keep in mind, this is like, nobody else is even in the house at this point, right? They don't have water on the fire. This room's still very much on fire in the front side. And I scoop this little girl up, and I go out the front door and just hand it to someone. Take, right? I'm going back in. Follow my footsteps back in, back to the bedroom. Within, 6 feet of that first child, I find a second, right? Scoop that kid up, back out to the front door, same maneuver, hand her off, back into the house. At that point, they're putting water on the fire. There's other people that are conducting searches. And I go back in, same thing, bunk bed, up to the top bunk, another kid. That point, yep. So I go back out, bring that kid out, and the incident had progressed so much at this point, and I know more now than I did then, but at that point, I get up to the front, like, here's the kid, and there's no one there because everyone's working. And so I am just holding this, this kid, and I'm walking out, and I over the radio, I'm listening, I hear to the south, that's where they're bringing the ambulances in. And so I'm like kind of trudging down the block, like on a half jog with this kid. And I get to this circle, and there's people just doing all of these kids are in cardiac arrest coming out, right? So
really,
yeah,
I was gonna smoke inhalation, all of it. They're out.
Yeah, and they're not badly damaged, right? They're not like burnt up, but they're definitely, not currently alive, I would say, right? And so I bring this kid down to this circle, and there's already 2 pediatric cardiac arrests being worked in this circle. Now I add a third to the mix, right? Unbeknownst to me, there's already another circle of the same size happening at a different place on the scene, because ultimately it ended up being 6 kids and a mom that came out of this one fire.
Oh my God.
And so I, I pull my mask off, I start doing CPR on this kid, and and then I find somebody else, and I'm like, hey, take this over. I'm much better suited to go back in and keep doing what I'm equipped to do, right? There's plenty of people that can do the CPR, but I'm in a position where I know the layout of the house. I can go back and keep searching. On my walk back, I run into a district chief that's like, how many did you get? And I was like, I got 3. I don't know how many more there are, but I know they were pulling out more. There's at least, and he's like, we have 5 right now. We're looking for, we have a mom, but we don't know where the dad is. And so he's like, find me the dad. And so I'm going back into the house, and I'm once again still by myself, just like looking through this house, like desperately trying to find this other adult, which we never ended up finding. Ended up being, like I said, the 6 kids and a mom.
The dad was never found?
The dad was at work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, my buddy Mason, who ended up being the co-recipient of that like Valor Award and the Firefighter of the Year, he ended up pulling out 2 kids. I pulled out 3, and then we had some other firefighters that were working with us that rescued the balance of that. But we're talking, 7 simultaneous cardiac arrest managed on the scene. We're talking multiple pediatric arrests being transported in the same ambulance to the hospital, right? And it's 70, somewhere around 70 people responded to the scene. And
Wow.
ultimately, which is where it gets even crazier, is that all 7 of the victims that came out eventually got pulses back. Ultimately, we ended up losing all but the mom and 2 of the kids. One of the ones that I rescued, one of the ones that my buddy Mason rescued, they lived, and then unfortunately the rest of them passed. But even the fact in that culture is a really big deal. We found out that they were able to pass under the same roof in their traditional clothing, and the family, we heard through the grapevine that the family was extremely fortunate or grateful that they were able to pass in that way, because if they wouldn't, then it would have caused long-term implications in their culture and stuff.
Well, what culture was that? Too?
They were Hmong.
Oh, okay.
And so
Yep.
based on them being able to wear their traditional clothing and do the rituals that they needed to do to pass on, even though we lost, a bunch of them, our work was still super valuable to the family, obviously, and they were able to say goodbye and all these things. And then, cut to a year later almost, or maybe it was probably 6 months later, we ended up meeting the kids that they rescued and the dad, and
really?
which was an unbelievable experience. Just
wow.
But yeah, I mean, and the reality is I feel really weird about the situation because I got a lot of accolades. Mason got a lot of accolades, but I feel like such a small cog in the wheel, right? I was one of a 70-person response. Ultimately, I spent, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes with these kids, and these paramedics.
It's an important 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
these paramedics, went from dropping their packs, thinking they're going to do firefighting. Now they're managing a pediatric cardiac arrest. We had people from our department riding in the ambulance in their full turnout gear, intubating a kid in the hospital because the doctor couldn't do it.
Wow.
The St. Paul Fire Department was flexing. They were
it's incredible, dude.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate that I was just a part of it, but the reality is that the awards I've gotten, I've always said it from the very beginning, is this is not a me award. This is a look what the St. Paul Fire Department can do award, right? And I'm super proud of that. And I've been able to be the flag bearer for it, but I feel very much like that. I do not feel like the sole recipient or something like that.
Sure. It's an incredible story, dude. It's fascinating because you're just, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not trying to be the hero, right? You're not, like you said earlier in the conversation, you just made the decision to go in, and it was calculated. Yeah. It wasn't cowboy. Did anybody ever in the debriefs or the after action, like you said, sometimes actions like that could result in, if you're needlessly endangering yourself,
yeah,
even it's for obviously, I think a cause that we would all justify in our brains, hey, if there's children or people in here, me be damned, I'm going to go find them, right?
For sure, that's the job, right? I mean, the reality is if you don't believe that, you should not be in the career field, right? The only people that should be firefighter are the people that are willing to say, myself be damned, I'm going to do the thing. I have all the gear, I have all the training. We are the last hope for those people in that burning building, right?
Unreal, dude. Unreal.
And I was nervous. It wasn't a thing that I thought about at the time. It wasn't hopefully the administrative staff is okay with this. It was very much this is what needs to be done. I'm gonna go do it, and then I do it, and then afterwards I remember being oh, I might get in trouble for this. And then we were in a debrief a couple days later, and they were kind of going through the actions of each group. Squad 1, talk about what you did. Engine 17, talk about what you did. And I was I'm just gonna say what I did, right? And I was and even in that debrief, I was this one might I might get in trouble for this, but I want you guys to know the truth of what happened. And to his credit, our fire chief stood up and said, that's what I want, right? You did exactly what we expect you to do, and I back it. You're not in trouble, all this stuff. And I was cool, because we were just on the heels of, man, I wish I could remember his name specifically, but there was a case down in Atlanta where a fire captain made entry to a home in some weird circumstances, kind of similar, and he was disciplined and ultimately fired for like breaking protocol. And so like there was a legitimate case that I was like, oh man, am I going to get in a lot of trouble for this? For like going in by myself without a hose line in place? Like it was a real thing.
So, and this might be naive of me, but obviously never having been a full-time firefighter, like there's instances where even if you do something incredibly heroic and save lives, if it breaks protocol, can result in extreme disciplinary action.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the equivalent would be like the military, like breaking an ROE or something, right? It's like, hey, you did the right thing, but XYZ thing went against your orders, right?
Sure.
And so, I think it depends on the culture of the organization. I think St. Paul really does foster a really aggressive, firefighting culture that it's our job to get in there and affect change. But there are a lot of fire departments that are much more timid in their approach. And unfortunately, like when there were more, like the unfortunate truth is that they're more worried about their own safety than the people that they were sworn to protect.
Right.
Right. They're more worried about the people on the staff or on the payroll than they are about the people that are, counting on them to help. And that's just an unfortunate, whether it's, litigation or administrative bloat or a disconnect from the streets. I think a lot of times the administration will, they've been in administration for so long, they forgot what your actual job is. And
to be in the house, on the ground.
Yeah,
right.
Ultimately your job is to go and be hope for the hopeless, right? There is nobody that's coming other than you, right? When the house is on fire and it's filled with smoke, there is no one else coming, right? You are the last hope. And so I think sometimes administrative people and people that are removed from the streets forget that, like, yep, it's great to wear a polo and have pressed pants and do all this stuff, but ultimately the only thing that the citizen cares about is that when their house is on fire, you're coming, right? That's what they care about.
Oh, dude. It's, well, there's so much to unpack there. Like, so after, like, what is it like? What is the post-engagement? I would call it a post-engagement sequence or post-fire sequence. Like, everyone's got, we'll just say for the fire is out, right? Or the house is burned to the ground, and the cleanup, and all of the victims are getting treatment and they're on their way. And like, what are the minutes, the hours, the days like after that kind of an experience?
It was very surreal. If we come to the exact moments, and we'll have to double back to this because there's a lot of story that comes with this story. But my first thing, the fire's out, we're moving into investigative stage, right? This is like literally like moments after the fire's out, right? I remember I walked out and I found this old salty driver, and he had a pack of Newports, and I was like, can I have
Give me one of those,
Yeah, and I had the greatest cigarette of my life.
I bet.
But then I walked across the street and sat on the stoop of the house across the street, and this ties into a conversation we had earlier today, but I just like, everything hit me. The reality of the motivations of why I became a firefighter and what I had just done landed on my shoulders, which we talk about, like, why I became a firefighter because my dad's story, and this will side tangent us way down so we can touch on it later, but it was extremely heavy. Like, the tears come down and I wrap it up and finish my cigarette and go back. And I remember someone came up to me and was like, hey, do you want to go home? And I was like, the last thing I want to do is go home. I want to be with my guys right now, and I want to go like wrap up. And so we pick up the hose and we hang out and we go back to the station. And now it's 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We throw on a pot of coffee. Obviously, no one's going to bed. Right.
Right. Yeah. Right. You're probably up for 4 days straight.
Yeah. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the things started to land on me that like, well, what had just occurred? You know what I mean? Because like, I was just doing my job. Like, it's the quote unquote humble thing to say, but also it's very much the truth. I was just like, riding in the seat that I happened to be seated in. This is the fire that came out, and now I did what the expectation of me is. And all of a sudden, I'm getting texts like, hey, man, did this actually happen? Blah, blah, blah. And so we had one more call. We did a ring removal later that night. That's kind of we literally didn't stop. We kept going on runs. And then we get off shift at like 7, and then the stories start like I start getting the text messages like, hey, is it true that you pulled like 3 kids out of this house or whatever? I'm like, yeah. And so then we go to a union meeting, ironically, and I'm sitting in the right off shift. We get off at 7 a.m. I go to union meeting at 8:30, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and I look down, it's the fire chief's calling me. And I'm like,
this is either going to be real good or real bad.
Yeah. That's exactly right. I was like, I don't get very many calls from him, like 0. So if I'm getting a call from him, we're not a small department, so the fire chief doesn't call you. Like some departments, you have a relationship with the fire chief. I don't really have a relationship with the fire chief. He's calling me. It's either really good or really bad. And so he calls me and congratulates me and thanks me for what I did. And that was a very surreal experience because I'm like, I'm talking to the fire chief here, and he's telling me good things. Like, and this kind of comes back to a lot of my story as well, which is like, I've never been good at anything in my life, right? Like I've always been like the backup quarterback and like the guy picked last on the team, and like that's been my story. And like finally, I found firefighting, and I found something I was good at.
I was gonna say, sounds like you're pretty good at something.
But that was starting to click for me. I always wanted to be good at something, desperately wanted to be like, oh, I could be like a starter. And now I finally like became that a little bit. And that was the validation that I've been searching for a long time. And at that point in my career, in our system, like a lot of merit is based off of these appointments. Like you get appointed to the rescue squad, and now you're like, that validates that you're good at your job. And I was getting passed over and passed over and passed over and passed over. And, to the point that like, everyone's like, I don't know what you did, but they hate you downtown for some reason, right? And it was wearing on me. I was feeling pretty bad about myself. And then this happened, and all of a sudden I was like, all right, I do know what I'm doing, right? And I felt like a hint of confidence.
Sure.
And so then we go through that. Now it's like, all right, now we're doing press conferences, and now we're doing, on that tail end of this incident, like I did a press conference, which I ultimately got in trouble for. Because my mustache wasn't in SOPs, right?
Of course.
Of course, right?
You're out of ranks.
Which that was a really frustrating situation for me because, I had all these chief officers coming up and shaking my hand and saying, oh, thank you so much. You're exactly who we want, right? We wish we could have 400 of you, right? We had that like said to me. And then I hear through the grapevine, your mustache is disrespectful because it's not following protocol or whatever. And I'm like, man, I just cannot catch a break. Even when I do the right thing, I'm getting in trouble.
I think it's the most firefighter mustache I've ever seen. Yeah, it's perfect.
But yeah, so even in my wins, I had losses, right? Now I'm finally like feeling good about myself for the first time in a while because I proved that I actually was who I thought I was. And then they chopped my knees out from underneath me, that I'm in trouble now. Literally within 48 hours of this event, right?
Wow.
And so then we do like the post-incident stress debrief, like what you would expect all that to be, kind of sit in the circle and tell your tale from your thing and fill in the gaps. Apparently, they say that one of the hardest parts post-incident is that like, I know what I did and you know what you did, but I don't know what you did and you don't know what I did. And so all these questions just spin.
Sure. You have your individual perspective because you kind of tunnel visioned in and on autopilot, the training kicks in. You probably have no idea. And if you think you know what happened to the guy to the left and right, it's probably fairly inaccurate.
Yeah, and apparently I've since learned that a lot of that like early stress post-incident is caused by the unknowns. It's like, oh, I wish I knew what happened over there, and now all I'm going to do is think about that, right? So like filling in some of those gaps can squash some of those like cyclical thoughts, right?
Interesting.
And so yeah, we did that, and then things kind of normalized a little bit, and then all of a sudden it was like cover of the paper, on the news. It was like
it's a lot of attention.
And like, I didn't ask for that, right? So now like you have this like super critical incident that like is a career defining incident, something you'll never experience again in your life. Yeah, yes, there's like a positive note to it, like, wow, we expected you to do your job and you totally did it. But also now everyone wants to talk to you about it. Everyone wants to like be involved. It felt like these like almost like piranhas. Like it's like, oh, I want to be involved. I want to be involved. And like so it's like, and don't get me wrong, there was also a super nice supportive component, which is like text messages, hundreds of text messages of like, oh man, super proud of you, great job, which feels good, obviously.
Oh, for sure.
But then also, which ultimately led to my downfall in terms of my mental health was that, I didn't feel very good about myself. I was really struggling with depression and addiction and all these things. And all of a sudden, it's like everyone in the world says, you are the greatest thing that ever happened. Or way too many people at the very least said that. And I was like, I don't feel that way. I think if you actually knew me, you wouldn't feel that way either. And man, you would be shocked how low you can feel when you feel like you're the only person in the world that knows you.
Yeah, dude, and we talked about that a little bit outside, and I definitely want to kind of drill down and unpack on that as well. But like, there's a question that comes to my mind, like, so everyone in their chosen profession, especially if it's a high octane, high stakes, and obviously being a firefighter is one, police officer, firefighter, like. You have this movie that's playing in your military is no different. Like I have this movie that's playing in my head of what I think combat is going to be like, or like I can imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that isn't the quintessential firefighter heroic story, right? And then how did that? You had to have imagined that or had that movie playing in your head, kind of like one day this will happen.
Yeah, I mean,
and then it does.
Yeah.
So what was that comparison like?
It's really hard because like part of you wants to be like, hell yeah, I am the guy that I thought I was. Like I am the one that can actually do this, like to a very high level. But then you start to feel bad about that because you're like, oh, like no one likes that guy who like thinks they're great, right?
Sure.
So like you're battling this battle between confidence and arrogance and cockiness, and I consider myself a decent human. I try to like keep a lid on like cockiness and arrogance and, ground myself in reality. But all of a sudden it's a slippery slope when everyone starts telling you you're cool and good.
Yeah. I mean, not that everyone tells me I'm cool, but could it be described as almost like crippling humility, right? Like crippling humility, right? And do you think the amount of attention that you got, right? Because you said everyone wants a piece of a good heroic story, right? It's an incredible story. And you didn't have time to fully, I would assume you didn't have time to fully process like the levity of the events and thrust into all of this attention and the spotlight, right? And I think obviously it speaks to your professional character and your personal character of that humility. But at a certain point, like you said, you start to almost feel bad about it.
For sure, I did. And I felt bad in the way that you're like, I think it's kind of cliche when you talk to some people about this, which is like, I was just the guy that happened to be in the seat that day, right? Like, yes, I know, and I've since been told many times that maybe other people wouldn't have done the same thing, right? But to me, I don't know that. Like, there's a lot of capable firefighters on my fire department. You know what I mean?
It sounds like it.
And if they were in my seat that day, they probably would. I would like to think that they made the same decision and we would have had similar outcomes. And so like, why is everyone propping me up and gassing me up when like, I just happen to be the guy. It could have been somebody else, know? But at the same time, I think that's a pretty healthy way to view it. Like it would be an unhealthy way to say, I am the only one that could have done this and I am the greatest. And if anyone else was in that seat, they would have messed it up. And, like that's an ugly way to view the world. I think it's an ugly way to like, view yourself too. It's like, get out of your own way, I think.
Well, right, especially when it's because you're in combat. It's just nobody's shooting at you. You're combating the fire. And the guy to the left and the right of you, it's got to be very, very similar to what military and police officers with their partners or their teams experience, right? So, yeah, to your point, like you just happen to get in that seat that day.
Yeah.
Right. I think that is the perfect way to look at it because that's what happened, right? Definitely does not detract from what you did because what you did was incredible. Man, and so both those awards came out of that singular.
Yeah.
That singular
Yep.
fire.
So the Minnesota Firefighter Award came from an organization called the Minnesota 100 Club, which is like they sell license plates and stuff, and then they give death benefits when there's line of duty deaths for police and fire. And so they do an annual award for first responders of all categories. And so me and Mason jointly won the Minnesota Firefighter of the Year for 24. And then that like rumbling kind of got out to, this magazine, and then they eventually put us in for like the editor-in-chief of Firehouse magazine used to be the staff photographer for St. Paul. So he keeps in touch and hears that, and then they eventually put us in for it. And yeah, we're very fortunate. Unfortunately, Mason, my compadre in that, was on deployment. He's in deployment right now, so he wasn't able to come to Charleston for the award, which I feel kind of bad about. But
so once again, this is a completely naive question, but like, how common is it to not only have one save but three over the, you know what I'm saying, in one sitting, right?
I mean, I'll never do it again. I mean, I hope I'll never do it again. I mean, you know, but it's, you know, someone might get that many in their career. And like people get rescues every once in a while, but like obviously it's pretty atypical to have 7 people in a home at the same time. And so, yeah, it was definitely, without a doubt, it's the fire of my career. Like it's all downhill from here.
Wow.
But, you know, and that's good, hopefully, right?
Right. It's a weird,
right. It's a weird dynamic. And I don't know if there's a military equivalent to it, which is like, you know, we train our whole life to put out fires, but also we're kind of like crossing our fingers for them to come in. It's like there's this like, I don't want there to be a fire, but if it happens, I want to be there.
Right.
Which is kind of this weird dynamic in the fire service that's kind of this like not super publicized undertone, right? Which is like, we're here to protect you, but also if your house burns down, we definitely want to come. To the party, right?
I used a similar analogy, and I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was like, yeah, you know, in the you know, combat arms, you know, it's like, I said, hey, a fireman trains, you know, 24/7 when he's on shift. He doesn't walk around with gas throwing matches. Yeah, you know, but if a fire starts, he's going to show up. I said, well, that's kind of the military equivalent. Like, we're going to train until it's time to go implement that training on some, you know, some poor souls. Yeah. Right? But I'm not going to start anything if I don't have to, right? Yeah. Depending on the capacity that I'm operating in, right? Man, that's and you said you had another call like right after that.
Yeah, it was nothing like super crazy, but it looking back on it, it makes me laugh that we, like, you know, it was a pretty critical incident for our crew, and then, like, you know, 2 hours later we were like at somebody's house removing a stuck wedding ring off their, you know, their finger.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, it was. And it was just like I guess back to normal. I mean, I'm such a proponent of this, and like, maybe this is a controversial take, but I'll die on this hill, which is this idea that, like, when critical incidences happen, we should not be sending people home. We should not be like removing them from the tribe, right? We should be like staying together and trudging forward and putting the bad call in the rear view, right? Like the bad incident, the bad scene. Because, like, you know, that has been the most effective thing to me. It's what we see over and over in the fire service, and it's starting to trend in a better way, which is like, oh, you went on this horrible call. We recognize that. You should go home and, like, be alone and, like, just think about this for the next however long. You're like, that's a terrible plan. What you should do is go on 20 more runs and have this be 20 runs ago, and it's not so fresh in your brain or whatever.
It's kind of stay busy and stay focused.
Yeah, and stay and, like, you know, stay with the people that understand it. Stay with the people that get it. Don't, like, go home and, like, data dump on your poor wife that, you know, can't handle this information. That's like, let's be realistic. You should be at the firehouse, like, smoking and joking with your boys, like, who get it, right? Don't go home and. But that's not a fully received. That's a hot take in some communities.
Is it? I mean, obviously, there's no negative repercussions for taking time if you need time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I could have easily said I want to go home, and they would be like, "Oh yeah, for sure, that totally makes sense." But my wife said, if you would have came home, I would have said, "Get the hell out of our house, go back to the fire station, right? You can be with your friends, right?"
Oh my gosh, dude! It had to take. I mean, how long did it take before you had kind of fully processed it, right? Is it one of those things where? And I'm not saying PTSD in like a negative light, right? I'm just saying, like, you know, and all I can do is relate to combat. My combat experiences, I don't look at my combat experiences in a negative light. They're just always there. Is that fair to say? Sure. Is that fire just always going to be like playing in the background? Yeah,
I mean, it's what, almost 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, a year and a half ago. I mean, I don't know if I go a day without thinking about it in some capacity.
It's just always going to be.
It's
there.
not necessarily uber traumatic, but it's definitely there. But on the tail end of it, you know, it was like picking up my kids felt weird for a while.
Really?
When I would pick up my kids, it would feel like I was carrying the kids for a while. when I would do searches for probably a few months afterwards, I would constantly remember that the feeling I described of like inanimate object, living thing. I would feel that feeling when I did searches, even when I was touching like a table.
Or get like a false report.
I would touch it and it would go, oh, what is that? And and then that's since passed, and that only lasted maybe a month or two, but that was definitely like a textbook PTSD symptom of like, I would feel these, phantom children as I would do searches.
Right.
Yeah. And then like I said, my kids are, older. My kids are 7 and 9 now, but when I would pick them up, it would definitely just like boom right there.
Wow.
It felt just like it. And that lasted for a while. And then it was like replaying the incident. It was like, oh man, what if I would have did this differently or that differently? Could I have had a better outcome? Obviously, like 2 of the 3 kids I pulled out ended up subsequently dying, right? So like, if I would have did this differently, would have been a different result. The first kid I pulled out lived, the other 2 passed. So I'm like, well, what if I would have changed? What if I would have like, after I found the first, reached over and found the second? If I would have got that one out at the same time as the first one, would they both lived? So then it's like, a little bit of self-blame, a little bit of self-doubt. Like, did I do the right thing?
Oh, well, yeah, it's like that's, survivor's guilt / I don't know if this is a coin phrase or not, but kind of like, professional or survival critical analysis.
Yeah.
Like how could I have done it better?
And the reality is that mechanism is what makes great people great. Right? The mechanism of like having a positive incident and still picking it apart to make it better the next time, and not just like patting yourself on the back and moving forward on the greatest thing that ever happened. It's like, wait, yep, this is good, but how can we optimize? What could I do better in the future? Right? I've learned way more from the things I did wrong than from the things I did right.
Oh, sure, right? Sure, yeah.
And so like, I'm happy that I have that mechanism. Like some people might call that like a PTSD symptom or something, but I'm very happy that I have the mechanism to have an incident spiral in my brain for a while and pick it apart and know what's good and bad and what could be done better.
Yeah. Oh man, it's and just think about that sentence out loud for a second. For some, think about that sentence out loud, not coming from somebody like you or the people that you work with, or it. How could I have? You did this incredible thing, this absolutely hands down, no questions asked, incredible thing. And the first immediate response or thought process is, how could I have done it better? You know what I mean? Like that obviously once again speaks to your character, speaks to your moral fiber, and obviously why you're in your chosen profession. That amount of honest self-assessment and kind of me last, or me be damned, right? Wow.
And I think if you want to be quote unquote elite, you have to have that mindset, right? If you ever think that you have it dicked, then you probably don't. Right?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I think that's like a pretty decent compass for your life, right? You should always be learning, always feel like you're a little bit behind. Because if you ever feel like you're like the greatest thing that ever happened, you probably aren't.
Right. Yeah. You should, the minute you're comfortable, you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah. And
right?
then you should. It really comes with that. Like, I assume you're familiar with like the Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah. So like that Dunning-Kruger effect, you get to the peak of stupidity and you're actually pretty much useless, and then you drop back down to the valley of despair, and you never reach the confidence that you had when you knew nothing. And that's because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
Sure.
For people that aren't familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, it's this idea that the less you know about a given subject, the more you think you know, because you don't understand the totality of the scope.
Right.
But it really comes down to that confidence, in action, which is I'll never be fully confident because I'll always know the more I learn, the more there is to learn. Right? Sure. And so you should never feel like you got it all down.
Yeah, you never have it licked. And I don't know if it's a certain instance or if it's an age or if it's a level of experience. Like in the beginning part of my career, when in my younger years where I don't want to say I thought I knew everything. I think there's a certain element where like, hey, I got this down pat. Whatever my chosen profession is, I know I'm functionally dangerous and then some. I'm above average, right? And then you're afraid to make mistakes because you associate, well, if I'm as good as I think I am, then I shouldn't make mistakes. And then you cross this personal bridge at some point, whether it's an experience or just being humbled or what have you, or a combination of the above, where it's like, now I realize that I don't really know shit. And now I'm not afraid to make any mistakes because that's how I learn. Like it's this drastic change in kind of thought process, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's, like I said, emotional maturity or what, but.
Well, and I think that the idea of having like operational confidence is super important, right? So like the whole managing that Dunning-Kruger effect or that sliding scale of competence, like you still need to like have enough confidence to take action.
Sure.
Right? If you don't have enough confidence to take action, you're going to stumble on your feet and you're not going to like take decisive action. So you have to have some baseline of like, I know this, give and trade well enough that I can make a decision, take action immediately, and it'll probably be the right choice, right? But then once the incident's over, you come back and go, okay, let's chop this thing up and see what went good and what went bad. But I think all too often people that are, more mediocre, let's say, just pat themselves on the back and go, that went great. Let's do another great one next time.
Yeah.
And more often their standard for great is less great than it could be.
Yeah, 100%, dude. I teach part-time at the police academy here, firearms and tactics, and the recruits are young and eager. And, one of the things I kind of try and, soapbox when I get a chance to soapbox, I'm like, hey, man, amateurs want attaboys, professionals want critiques. Don't tell me what I did right. I know what I did right. Tell me what I did wrong, right? Yeah. And because I don't want to make that mistake again, right? That's the only mistake is the one you do twice, kind of willfully, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so, ultimately, attaboys aren't, what are they worth? And I mean, they're fleeting, I would say.
Sure.
Right? They feel good in the moment, but they don't get you anywhere.
Yeah, because I'm sure you're only as good as your last fire.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's a saying, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's and that's the reality is like, and you have to stay sharp. It's just like any perishable skill, right? Like you can be great yesterday, but if you can't do the same thing today, that is what's it worth, right?
Right.
Like what you were able to do last week doesn't do me any good right now.
Yeah, nobody
right?
cares, right?
Yeah.
And we, we're hard on ourselves. We say nobody cares. People care, but
yeah.
Right? It's yeah, it's a thing, man. Well, that is. Thank you for sharing that story. But even a more incredible banana story is your origin story. Your origin story. Do you want to get into that because it's fascinating. To me.
We were talking about it a little bit earlier. So, I'm the youngest of 7. Well, I have 6 half siblings, one kind of adopted brother in there, and my parents, met under crazy circumstances, which I'll cover. And then my half sibling's father was the fire chief of the fire department I work for now. We kind of were this original blended family. My dad bought the house or the lot from him, and then we shared a backyard, and like I was kind of in between the 2 houses. And my next closest sibling's 10 years older than me, and then my oldest sibling's 20 years older than me. So I am this kind of weird old soul because I always hung out with people much older than me.
Yep.
The other thing with that is like I'll tell stories about my brothers were beating me up or whatever, and then it doesn't sound that bad, and then you realize that they were 10 years older than me. So when I was 8, they were an adult.
Yeah.
So like to talk about like my actual parents. So it's this crazy dynamic, right? And this will really ultimately drive why I became a firefighter. But my dad had a really tough childhood, right? His father was pretty abusive. By pretty abusive, I mean like extremely abusive. He started with drugs and alcohol extremely early. Like he was doing like hard drugs when he was like in his preteens and stuff. And it was just a struggle. And ultimately, I think he was 19. He ended up being convicted of murder. There was a domestic dispute, a scuffle. His girlfriend at the time was stabbed. And there's kind of this like cloud of what the heck actually happened. Ultimately, he like scooped her up, brought her to the hospital, pled no contest, did 7 years in jail. I would say before that runs away, it was like, he is now the greatest person, maybe the greatest man I've ever met. Like he is like unbelievable father, unbelievable grandfather, the antithesis of who his father was. And I'm so grateful that he, when you have a troubled past, you either repeat it or you reflect it.
Truly reformed.
And he decided to reflect it. And he is just an entirely different person. He became a boarding Christian in jail and just changed his life entirely. So on the flip side, my mom, God love her, I'm sure she's gonna listen to this, so hi, Ma.
Yeah.
So my mom was corresponding with this person in jail. His name's Chris Boyce. He was a component of the movie The Falcon and the Snowman, which is a movie with Sean Penn about Russian espionage, and like it's a crazy thing. But long story short, she was sending letters back and forth to this guy. They met up because he was quite a painter, and so she was going to give paintings to my mom to like send to his mom, something like that. And he was like, "You should meet this guy that I know, and he's awesome. He's this Christian guy. He's just about to get out. I think you'd like him a lot." And so this guy from this, Russian espionage, trial is my dad's friend, introduces my mom and dad together, and then they start dating when he gets out of prison. They meet while he's in prison, and then ultimately, I don't know, a year later, they have little old me.
Yeah.
And then you progress that story, obviously, cut to, I was maybe in my teens, early teens, and my mom, I remember so distinctly, I don't know why this one really sticks out, but I remember very distinctly we were going to a Sam's Club, and my mom was like, "I have to talk to you about something." And I was like, "Oh no, we're going to have the sex talk." I remember very distinctly, and she's like, then she told me the whole thing about my dad going to prison.
Yeah, I was going to.
And so she told me, and that's when I first found out. But I remember very distinctly being like, "Oh no, I don't want to have the sex talk with my mom at Sam's Club."
That's fair.
But she told me everything about my dad, and this was just earth-shattering to me.
Well, yeah, how old were you when this conversation took
Probably
place?
13, something like that.
Wow.
And I was like, the only person I knew at that point was this guy that was the greatest guy I've ever met, right? Everything I could aspire to be. And now you're telling me, oh, this is his history? This was just mind-blowing, right? Like the hero of heroes now has this backstory, which is crazy.
Why do you think? I have so many questions. Why? And maybe you don't have maybe some of these you don't have answers to, but like that is so heavy for a 13-year-old, right?
Yeah, I don't know why they chose that time at in a Sam's Club parking lot was the good time, but.
I mean, has that never come up in subsequent like, hey, thinking back, Mom, why, you know what I mean? And obviously she was doing what she thought was the right thing. I'm not saying she did anything wrong.
No.
But 13, dude, that's...
and I remember being like, taking it pretty well, being like, "Oh, wow, crazy."
Holy shit.
But yeah, I remember that. And then that was just a thing that I knew. And then all of a sudden, like, I had all these weird memories. Like, wait, I remember like visiting this guy in jail when I was a kid. And like, I never thought anything weird about that. But then, we were visiting Chris in jail, like my dad's buddy who introduced my parents. Like that was like a childhood memory. Go sit on his lap in the visitation room at the prison. And like, I didn't think anything of it. Like it was just like a memory that like was kind of repressed or something. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh man, that's weird. That makes a lot of sense, right?
Was your father there when she told you?
No. Like I'm sure on the tail end of my mom's gonna be like, "That's not how it happened. This is my memory. I'm sticking to it." But no, it was, and then then to progress this story along, right? Ultimately, my dad is like he's a contractor, but he also is a fishing guide in Minnesota, and so to be a fishing guide on the river, you have to be a captain, like a boat captain, and at the time, to become a boat captain, you couldn't be a felon. So he sought a pardon, a governor's pardon. Like, "Hey, I've been clean and sober for 20 years. Like, blah 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 blah. Like, will you allow me to like expunge my record so that I can pursue this new career?" Long story short, he goes before the governor at the time of Tim Pawlenty, and the governor says, "Dan, you've clearly been reformed. You're obviously not a danger to society. Like, God bless you for the work you're doing in rehab programs and evangelism, but we're not going to pardon you."
Oh, wow, that's brutal.
And so I remember that was a definitive point in my life as a child. I was probably 16 at the time. And I remember standing like in the back of this like courtroom kind of like space, being like completely trapped, like behind this like invisible glass, being like, I'm helpless to defend the person that I love the most, right? And like, despite the fact that I've never known the person that they say he is, they still think that he's not able to rejoin society. And that was crushing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just crushing. And so I made two kind of promises to myself that day. I'm going to save lives. I'm going to do whatever I can to try to like balance the proverbial scale. Right? We lost one. How many can I bring back that should be gone? And then I also promised myself that someday when I'm older and more capable, I'm going to come back and we're going to do this and I'm going to get it through. And so that's what sent me down the rabbit hole of being a fireman, right? I was dead set on avenging the life that was lost for the sake of balancing the scales for my dad.
That's incredible.
And so if we cut back to my story earlier, that's what hit me when I sat across the road and smoked that Newport, right?
Yeah, as the scales have been leveled or balanced. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so everyone thought that I was like traumatized by the incident, but actually I was in a whole different headspace, right?
Wow, man. Because what's the time? 16, and how old were you when the fire? That particular
31,
fire?
maybe,
Wow.
like that, 32.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so that the proverbial scales have been balanced at that point. And comes to find out all that balance is not for much, right? You know, it's not real, right? You don't get to pull anyone back from the grave. You can save them from the grave, but you can't really pull them back. So it didn't really give me the levity I thought maybe it would. But in another progression of that story, right? So at that point, I am like, okay, I've accomplished one of the goals, right? If I had two goals, right, it was I'm going to balance the scales and I'm going to come back and I'm going to fight this and get him pardoned, right? And so that started the wheels in motion for that, which was I had some small scale fanfare or whatever the hell.
You probably got a little bit of juice, right? Like
on the tail end of this.
Yeah, sure.
And so like the mayor came and visited us, the governor came and visited us. And when the governor was there, Walls, I pulled him aside. I was talking to my union president at the time, and I was like, I just need like 2 minutes with him. Give me like if everything I've ever done in my life brought me to this moment.
I've never asked you for anything. Just give me 2 minutes.
2 minutes with the governor, right? And so, better or worse, your opinion of Tim Walls, I spoke with him on the back patio of our fire station for a couple minutes, and he was really receptive. Like, hey, this is my story. My dad had this happen. I'd love to try to seek a pardon for him based on, his life and experience that's happening now. He said, give him a card. One of his aides gave me a card. We'll have a hearing in May. Reach out to him and you'll set up some sort of meeting or whatever. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this. Like everything's coming together theoretically. And obviously that's weighing really heavily on me at that point. And so one sidebar to this, if we'll take a tangent, is that like, so when the murder happened or the death happened, or however you want to phrase it, that the woman who died's daughter was there. My dad like scooped up the lady who had been stabbed, scooped up her daughter, brought her to the hospital. So that person exists in the world, right? So in my brain, I go, I wanna contact her and tell her that the scales have been balanced and that her mom's not forgotten, and that, 35 years later, I was thinking about her mom that night.
Did you get a hold of her?
Mm-hmm. Through crazy internet Googling or whatever the hell you want to call it, I tracked down this woman's phone number.
Unbelievable.
And I was like, this is a shot in the dark. This could be really ugly, right? We're dragging up some really hard, memories, of course, right?
Yeah, because I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you know how old the daughter was at the time?
She was 2 at the time, so she would have been like 40.
So probably no real solid recollection.
For sure.
Right? But nevertheless.
Yeah. And so, and I had met her one time before. She was at my dad's original pardon hearing, and she came and spoke against him. Yep. Which at the time, I thought it was like the cruelest thing I've ever seen, because the only thing I knew was this guy that I adored. And now this woman who doesn't know him at all says that he deserves to still be, removed from society in some way, shape, or form, right? And so and I don't even know what my thought process was at the time, but I remember very distinctly when the hearing was over, I walked up to her and said, like, I'm sorry, like, I forgive you. You don't know what you said about him, but I forgive you for what you said. And I felt like maybe it was like I'm a Christian. I believe that, like, I speak to God, and I don't know why in that moment I felt very compelled to say that to her, but that stuck with me for a long time. Me, like, forgiving her for her, it's such a flawed, like, thought process. In my brain, I felt like the victim, but the reality was that she was the one that was suffering, you know? But so back to, now we're seeking this pardon, a couple years ago. And so I find her phone number, and I'm like, the last memory I have interacting with her is this, like, I forgive you, right? And so I write out this message. And keep in mind, I found a phone number online. I don't know if this is actually her phone number. I don't know. Like, I'm about to send, like, a pretty heavy text message out into the wind, right? yeah. Right? And so I write this message out. Hey, this is my name. This is who my dad is. This is what happened. First off, I'm sorry that I forgave you that day because you didn't do anything wrong, right? And, like, I apologize for how I handled that because I do regret it because I do think that, like, she was just doing what she knew in her sphere, right? Like, who was I as some, like, punk-ass 15-year-old to forgive her for defending her dead mom? That's crazy. But that was my life experience up to that point, right? And so I apologized, and then I went into this thing. Hey, I just had this experience happen. I did these couple rescues. I just want you to know that, like, on the tail end of it, the only thing I was thinking about was doing this for the sake of your mom, and that, like, her legacy's not gone, and, like, people are still thinking about her, and that my dad lives his life indebted to that. My dad still goes and speaks to church groups and men's group and talks about his testimony and, like, how he's changed his life, and, like, all of that is in honor of your mother. Just same way that my whole life, my career, what I've decided to do with my whole life is in honor of that as well. So, like, when you feel like nobody remembers, like, there are people still living in the shadow of this, right? And ultimately, she came back and said, like, it was a couple days later, and I got a text like, oh my God, what she text back, right?
I was gonna say, you said this was over a text. You said this. How long did your thumb hover over the send button, dude?
It was like typed and sat, and then it was like, yeah, probably a solid day where I was like, am I really gonna do this? Because this opens up a real bag of worms here.
Wow.
I sent it, and then a couple days later, she didn't respond, so I was like, oh, maybe I got the wrong number or something. A couple days later, I get a text message back from her. And she was basically like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't forgive you. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this isn't, I was at peace with it. The idea that, like, I'm doing everything I possibly can to, help or try. Right. And then cut to another, couple days later, she ended up sending me, like, a message that basically was like, thank you for sharing. I'm sorry that, like, I wasn't more receptive the first time. I appreciate the sentiment, but I don't want to have any more contact with you. Very fair. Right? Very fair. But the ball's already rolling now. Now I'm like, we're going to go get this pardon. Like, now I have accumulated this skill set of, like, I'm training all the time. I'm fairly decent at public speaking. I'm fairly vocal, and now I'm going to, like, go and have the voice I didn't have then, right? I'm going to go and stand in front of this board, and I'm going to, like, plead the case the way that I know I can because I finally have the voice I didn't have. And so I coordinated this pardon proceeding, and, like, I filled out all the documentation. I got all these, like, reference letters from all these people across this that he knew. Talked to, he worked in this volunteer program, and he's in this prison ministry, and everything you could possibly do to build a resume package that looked unbelievable for this pardon to go through. And then, as we're approaching, I schedule a meeting with the governors. Through these processes, I schedule a meeting with the governor's chief counsel and his, like, policy advisor for pardons. So I'm like, holy crap, this is going to happen. Like, and I am like edge of my seat, like, holy crap, I'm going to achieve this thing that I thought was impossible. Right?
And can I pause you just for a quick second? Like, where is your dad at in this whole process? Is he, you know what I mean? Like, is he involved? Is he obviously, I'm sure, cheerleading your efforts, or?
It's really an oddity, and it'll come to it eventually as the story progresses. But it's like, I was talking to my wife about it. I really want to do this. And because my wife didn't even know my motivations to be a firefighter. My wife didn't know my motivations to do all these things. This was like deeply, deeply personal motivations, right? Like, she didn't know the story about doing the going to the pardon procedures. She didn't know any of that. And so I'm like, I think I want to do this. She's like, well, you need to talk to your dad if you're going to do this. You can't just drag this back up if he's not on board.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love my dad to death, but we're not like gonna sit down and have super deep level conversations all the time. It's certainly not the case, right? So I'm like, hey, I need to talk to you about something. And then I'm like, hey, how do you feel about me seeking this? And he's like, sure, that's fine. He's not like particularly passionate about it, right? He's lived his life, for 35 years as a felon, and he's accustomed to the fact that he can't own a gun or go to Canada or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So he agrees to it, but it's not like, he's not like over the moon, I'm going to do all the work to get it done, right? But he's like, oh, if you want to do that, that's great. I'll go along with it, right? Long story, even it's already very long, but we eventually get there to the pardon procedure. I meet with the governor's chief counsel, and she's like, this is absolutely a great story. Your dad totally meets the criteria. This is amazing. I think the governor's going to love this. Like, this is like, he's very much a champion of like police or criminal justice reform. This is a perfect case to like show like that we believe in people being reborn on the backside of tragedy, right? And so that meeting goes great. We then go into the first pardon proceeding, and we present the case. I have this nice long like script written out. It's going all great, and then the woman shows up.
No shit.
She shows up and once again speaks against him, which is I don't hold any fault against her. Like, that's her life experience.
Sure,
like,
yeah, right.
But we were like cooking with gas. Like before she spoke, I was like, this is gonna happen. Holy crap. She speaks, and then we come back up to the stage to kind of give our like final thoughts. And basically my dad throws the towel in and goes like, this is your deal, not my deal. I don't really care. And like the pardon board is like pushing him like, are you like, just what would you do with this newfound life? And like, it really felt like they were right on the cusp. And he was just like, nah, this isn't my thing. And like, who am I to judge, right? Who am I to say like, you should be fighting for this or you shouldn't, or, but ultimately it came down to right to the goal line. And he was like, nah. But in that, I found my peace of the idea that I did everything I could possibly do.
Oh my God, dude.
And so we, that was this last summer, and it was, obviously a stressor as I'm pushing into that, but like the weight that came off me after that of being like, I took my skill set, I took like my drive and motivation to bring us right to the goal line,
sure,
and gave him the opportunity to step across if he wanted to. Ultimately, he decided he didn't want to, and I made peace with that, right? But that was the culmination of those commitments I made to myself early on, right? Which was that I'm going to go fight back for this pardon, and I'm going to go try to balance the scales the best I could. And we did that, right? It didn't necessarily result in the way, it's kind of a weird thing in life, how like you make all these plans and you think it's going to go this way or that way. And then ultimately maybe it happens or doesn't happen, but it never happens the way you thought it was going to happen.
Of course not, right? Yeah, life has a way of getting in the way of the best laid plans, right? Yeah, that is an incredible story, dude. It's incredible. Like, and having had been, I'll be selfish for a split second here. Like, having been on your show, which we'll get into your podcast, like, I'm sitting across talking, having no idea, of who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Like, it's an incredible story. And what was And so what were the conversations like? And obviously don't get anything you don't want to, but what were the conversations like? Was that feeling of peace and, I guess contentment that you did everything that you set out to do? Was that immediate, or did you have conversations with, hey, I mean, there had to have been hey, what the fuck, man? You know what I mean? At some point, like
there was a little bit in my brain of like hey, this would have been pretty great to tell me prior to us being in front of the pardon board. Like, I would have loved if you would have brought this up yesterday. That would have been great.
Yeah.
But this is really comes to like describing me and my father's relationship. I love him to death. But like, we got back in the car after that. We said like, more or less, well, that was crazy. And then we just started talking about other stuff, and we haven't talked about it since.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
it was, but I feel peace with it. At first, I thought, I almost felt like I was pressing myself in the idea of like, why aren't you more disappointed? And I was like, I don't think I'm disappointed because I literally did everything I could possibly do. Like all the avenues were exhausted. I met with everyone that could possibly help, and I did everything. I brought us right to the goal line. All he had to say was yes, and I think it would have went through, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that like as a Christian, and him too, obviously, he's made his peace. He knows he's forgiven, and he knows that he doesn't need to, find worldly forgiveness. And so he's made his peace with, God. And I think everything else beyond that is gravy.
Sure.
And I think because of that, the burden I put on him in terms of maybe the heaviness he carries on a daily basis might have been different than what he actually carries. And I think that like ultimately he wasn't wrong by saying that this was my thing, not his thing, because I was looking to avenge the way I felt that day.
Yeah.
I was looking to say, I'm not going to be treated that way. I love this person. I'm going to fight for them.
Yeah.
And ultimately going back to that pardon board, without really realizing it, I was going to like avenge the way I felt that day.
Sure. Well, I mean, that had to take an incredible amount of, reflection, an incredible amount of reflection to kind of come with that. I mean, it was so after all of that happened, we in previous conversations, we've kind of covered this, like you said that you've had significant dark periods, and was that immediately after that this kind of took place, or?
No, I mean, it was like, I really spiraled. We talked about like all the accolades I was getting on the tail end of the fire, in dissonance with how I was feeling about myself. I didn't feel like a very good husband. I didn't feel like a very good father. I didn't feel like a good son. I was struggling with, pick the thing, and I was probably struggling with it. And so that was really what spiraled me out of control. This was really if anything, it was a positive experience. It was a stressful experience, like the pardon process, but like I felt like I had like tied a bow on this thing that was kind of looming over my head. But like I said earlier, the dissonance between who I felt like I was and who the world told me that I was so broad that I felt like if anyone actually knew me, no one would like me or love me or anything. So I felt extremely isolated in that, right? I was like, oh, you love me? You think I'm great? You think I'm whatever? I'm like, but you don't even know who I am, right? Like like this surface veneer, like the firefighter, like the funny guy or whatever.
The write-ups in the papers.
Pick the thing,
yeah.
right? But like you don't know who I really am. And so like that put me in a really, really dark place. And I was, I was at the point where like I was not wanting to live anymore, right? That's the reality. It was like, but if we go back to some of my history, one of my older brothers, Travis, committed suicide. He was a Marine veteran, came back, and he was just really troubled. He was we more or less adopted him because he had a troubled family life, and he came and lived with us for basically my whole childhood. My brother Danny's best friend, and after he died, I saw that was the first time in my life that I ever saw emotion other than like angry or happy. I didn't see people sad. I was sad. Like I would feel sad, but then I would feel bad about being sad or crying or something like that. But I would see people be angry and I would see people be happy. Like I had a happy childhood for the most part, right? But I would see people be angry too. But then now all of a sudden I was seeing everyone in my life simultaneously be the saddest they've ever been.
Yeah.
Right? And so, despite the fact that like I was in this horrible dark place, like literally not wanting to live, it wasn't an option because I've already seen the effects of suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So I refused to do that to my kids. I refused to do it to my parents, my siblings. So all of a sudden I was just rocking a hard place, right? I don't want to be here, but I can't leave. And it caused me to live recklessly.
I was going to say, how reckless did it make you in all aspects of your life?
Yeah, it was just like, why does anything matter? Nothing matters, right? All I want to do is not feel this way, right? So whatever it was that could help me not feel any way, I wanted to do that thing. So whether it was me working, 120 hours a week, or it was, alcohol or drugs or anything. It's just like, I don't want to feel, right? And then finally got to the point where my wife, God love her, she's the best thing that ever happened to me, was like, this is it. We're not doing this anymore, right? And so then in June of this year, I made the decision to go to treatment. So I went to treatment for 39 days out in Maryland at the IAFF Center of Excellence. And, it changed my life. I was already in therapy for years, but like my problems, my addictions, and my propensities and all these things were outpacing my recovery, despite the fact that
That's a good way to put it, right?
Yeah.
Or that's a good, yeah.
So despite the fact that I was getting better, I was getting worse at a rate faster than I was getting better. And so going to an inpatient treatment program allowed me to finally get ahead. And I came out of that feeling, very revitalized. And it's not to say that I'm not, without problems, right? Not to say that like there aren't still hard days, but I was finally ahead, and I finally am ahead for the first time in a long time.
Fuck, man, that's awesome. It's so what part of the treatment, if you will, what part of the treatment do you attribute, like what aspect of that time there in the treatment facility did you see as the most effective? Like, what was it that brought you out of it?
Yeah, so the biggest one for me is I'm a super rational person. So cognitive processing therapy, so CPT, which is basically identifying the things that you feel about yourself in the world and have experienced, and then cognitively breaking them down almost in like a court of law style thing. Like, this is what you believe, we'll provide evidence for that. And I'm going to provide counter evidence to what that thing might be. Right. And so working through this trauma group, I would go to trauma group for 2 hours every day, and I went for 3 weeks or whatever. And so it's a small group of people, and you present, your life story or whatever the traumatic incident. My traumatic incident was basically like my childhood, like in a chunk. And so then you say, well, what do you believe about yourself based off of these things? And I was like, I think that, I'm unwanted, and I'm unloved and unlovable, and I'm a liar, and I'm all these bad things. Like the list on the whiteboard was just like the most nasty list of things that you could write about someone. And that was all the views I had about myself. And well, no wonder I felt like shit.
Yeah, it's
right?
Incredibly unhealthy, right?
Yeah, right. But like these are the most deep-seated thoughts I had about myself, right? And so like ultimately we broke that down to this stuck point, which is like a thought that I'm stuck on, and I believe genuinely that I can prove via evidence, right? Which was, I don't deserve good things, right? And not like I don't deserve a fancy car. Like I don't deserve to be loved and forgiven, and and point by point, they went down the line and worked through it, and they were able to use the cognitive portion of my brain to say, oh, actually, these things that I were 100% sure were facts are actually, a fallacy, right? An example of that might be something like, I am a liar. And they're like, well, do you always lie? Or have you told a lie? Right? And it's like, oh, okay, so you're not a liar. You're a person that sometimes lies. And like, it seems like a nuance, but when you label yourself in a way, it does matter, right? Because now there's a reason, well, you shouldn't love me because I'm a liar. And you're like, well, you're not always a liar. You don't always lie. Like,
It's not
you've made
habitual.
mistakes, right?
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
made mistakes. And so ultimately, through that process, I went from, a statement that I would make about myself, which would be something along the lines of like, I'm a bad person that doesn't deserve good things, right? To, I'm a good person who's constantly struggling to do better and failing, but still trying my best, right? And that viewpoint shift in me was huge, right? And it seems small, like it's new, it's very similar, but it's nuanced, right? And so this view of self that I took, this view of myself, allowed me to start opening up, and being more transparent, being more willing to own who I am and not hide in the shadows and, confront some of my demons and have the confidence to deal with it. I was, I had this like classic depression, like, the classic, like, oh, he's the funniest life of the party guy, but actually behind the scenes, he's miserable. Like that was my life, right? That was my life for sure. And all of a sudden I had the ability to like just be me and not have to hide behind like the mask and
the
be okay
facade,
with that.
right? Yeah, the character that we create.
And ultimately what I discovered was the mask was just me, right? I was just doing myself, but I had been pretending for so long that it actually became me and it wasn't a mask anymore, right? And then I got the self-confidence just be like, oh, I'm just like being myself. I don't have to like put on an act. I'm just doing it. And it doesn't feel fake anymore because I used to like, interact with the world and it was going great, but I felt fake the whole time because I felt like I was acting.
Right.
But then you realize, oh, I'm not acting. I'm just being myself. If you do it long enough, it actually becomes you,
Yeah, dude, it's man, that's heavy. It's because I think we all, I think it's natural to present some sort of character, right? And then to your point, like through a series of traumatic events, or, I mean, would you attribute most of the spiral in as like a crash from the high of almost like the I'll call it the Kurt Cobain effect, right?
Yeah,
where he never wanted, theoretically he never wanted to be famous, or if you believe the stories, he never wanted to be famous, he never wanted the attention, and it was really all that fame and attention that kind of drove him to do what he did, if you believe he did it himself, right? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think if it wouldn't have been for the fire and the accolades that came off it, I would have been perfectly happy being mediocrely happy for the rest of my life. I was fine. I was getting by. I think most people wouldn't have known I was struggling. Obviously, my wife did, right? And the people closest to me, I remember people would be like, sure you can keep this pace up, right? You sure? And like, they were thinking I was just like really grinding, trying to achieve. But in reality, I was just trying to do anything but sit in a room and think.
And be alone with your thoughts and be alone.
Yeah.
I can relate, dude. And it's so strange that, well, it's not strange. It's common, but it's, intriguing that we decide to lean into something, as a form of escape. We decide to immerse ourselves in just everything is at level 10. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. It doesn't, right? Is that fair?
And the reality was that, I leaned into the fire service and into training and all the stuff that I was doing, as a career, because like I talked about earlier, I finally felt like I was good at something, and I didn't feel like a good husband, and I didn't feel like a good father. And so like, if I'm trying to find value in my life, I'm going to lean into the things that I think I do good. And ultimately what I want is to be that good husband and to be that good father and to be the example for them and all the things that are obvious. But when you don't feel good about one and you do feel good about the other, you tend to lean towards the thing that makes you not feel bad. And what it did was just drive me farther and farther towards career. And then I felt even worse because now I'm even worse of a father and even worse of a husband. And so then it's just this self-perpetuating cycle of like, the deeper you dive into work, the more you neglect your family, and then you become even worse, so you dive even deeper. And
and it's cyclical. And I went through a very, very similar period where, I found something that not only I was interested in, that I was, average or above average, if I, you know what I mean? And I just and everything else went on the back burner. And something that I'm not proud of, right?
Yeah.
And it's I think it's just one of those things where you have to go through that, and at a certain point you hit a wall. right? You just crash face first into this wall, and whether it's someone that you love or a treatment facility or an experimental program that, just kind of smacks the shit out of you and says, hey man, this is not sustainable, right? And not only is it not sustainable, it's not healthy. And, it's incredible that you were able to come out of that. And was there anything in the treatment that you still carry practices or techniques or healthy habits that, were instilled in your rehab or therapy that you continue to this day?
Yeah, and I think that even that cognitive processing, I think I do almost naturally now, which is like not believing what I feel, which is just because I feel something doesn't mean it's a fact. And unfortunately, in the current culture, people confuse facts and feelings a lot. And so just because I think something or feel something doesn't necessarily mean it's real. So challenging my own thoughts and going okay, I feel like that guy doesn't like me. Why do I feel that way? Do I have any evidence to prove that true?
Yeah, am I cooking this up?
Yeah, right. And so that's a big one in terms of reducing social anxiety or something like that. It's I don't have any evidence to show that that person's. I was the king of feeling like everyone was scheming on me, right? Because I had a kind of a rough junior high and high school, kind of ostracized, kind of bullied, classic. Wasn't really on the ins. So I was just convinced everyone hated me, the world hates me.
Healthy distrust.
I'm on the out. Yeah, I was if I walk out of the room, everyone's going to be talking about how they dislike me and they're glad that I'm gone. I was convinced, right? And it's just not grounded in reality. I mean, I'm sure there's some rooms where people feel that way. Yeah. But making peace with that too, which is just that was a thing that I really struggle with, which is this idea that not everyone has to like me. That's okay.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard. I mean, sometimes that's
a lot
hard
of times that was
with.
a struggle for me. It was I want everyone to like me because if they don't like me, then they hate me. Right? No one has a neutral position. They can't just but yeah, that was a really big one for me, which is this idea of just not just trusting my gut. I trust my gut in a lot of ways, but especially in social engagement and stuff, just being all right, can I put some facts to the matter here, why I'm feeling a certain way? And then I used to have pretty heavy running anxiety. I don't have it anymore at all. I'm pretty relaxed all the time. And I think a lot of that is just grounding myself in the moment. I think the way I feel now, 5 years ago, I probably kicked my own ass, right? I'm very be mindful and stay in the moment and don't think about the past or the future. Just be right here. And I'm who the hell are you? Right?
It's this, right? You want to kick your own ass, right?
I know, for sure.
But I think there is, and I think there is a culture shift in, we'll call it, I'm sure there's some places where, what is the typical male tendencies, right? Keep your mouth shut, push harder. Let's never talk about it. Push it all the way down, bury it, douse it with booze or God knows whatever else, right? Yep. And it's, and obviously, is it a generational thing? Is it, it's becoming much more acceptable in the kind of, for males, or people in general to be hey man, there's no fucking tough guys here. You can be tough, and obviously, you're the toughest thing on two legs, just doing what you do voluntarily, which is walk into a fire, right? In my opinion, that doesn't mean that you can't be in touch with emotion and feeling and, being mindful and being present. And I that's a culture shift that I think we desperately need.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the biggest things we were talking about a little bit earlier before we jumped on, which was I do feel a burden as a person with a platform to be open about it and not bury it in the sand and pretend like I wasn't struggling or and the truth was my life will always be a recovery program, right? You can't live the life, you can't do the career unless you it's proactive maintenance. It's no different than you have to hit the gym, you got to eat relatively okay most of the time, and you should have some bit of mental health regimen in your life, right? You gotta, right? And so that's one of the reasons that I don't really think much of it. I think it's just well, obviously, you have to try to improve your mental health, right? It's just a component of overall wellness.
Sure.
But don't get me wrong, there are some outliers to the mental health community that I think I'm not necessarily totally on board with. But like also, I'm very much like live and let live. I don't really care as long as you don't jam it down my throat.
Yeah, right, for sure.
But it's like, healing crystals or whatever. I don't know if I'm necessarily whatever. Go for it. I love it.
Yeah, right.
Great,
exactly.
good for you.
It's
right?
to each their own, right? Like if it's whether it's meditation or whatever you find peace and contentment and solace through, as long as it's not hurting anybody else, or then knock yourself out. For some people it's yoga, or whatever. Meditation was a big one for me, and it's to your point. Especially after I got done with Mexico and the treatment that I went through down in Mexico, which is ibogaine and DMT, it's like it opened up my perspective. It completely changed my perspective and kind of opened up the blinders to, my mental health and my physical health and obviously the happiness and contentment of those that I'm directly, encircled by, are affected by my daily choices. Mm-hmm. If I'm taking care of myself and I'm making good choices and I'm meditating or I'm journaling and I'm PTing and I'm exercising and I'm being present, not distracted, then I'm happier and everybody else is happier around me. If I'm not doing those things, then I find myself, kind of, the lights start to dim a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And like, I think that like, especially, it would seem in the military, first responder, everyone's on board with the whole like physical health component. I mean, there's a gradient scale, let's say.
Right.
But pretty much you're not going to find anyone that's advocating against physical health, right? Mm-hmm. So like I do find it interesting that there's still some bit of a contingent that's like, but we don't need any mental health,
I'm fine.
Yeah, you're fine.
I'm good.
Bury it down. You're like, the one thing I do find interesting is that like it doesn't appear to be equal, if that makes any sense, in terms of not everyone experiences things the same way. And like one thing that I've really come in touch with is this idea that like, if I lived your life experience, I would probably be you. And if you lived my life experience, you'd probably be me. I'm just some of my parts. There's some biology, but a lot of it is like what I've experienced and learned and seen. And so I used to be so hard-edged in this idea of like, what, you went on that call and that makes you like all messed up?
Oh, sure.
Like, and you're like, oh, but you don't know that like that person had this happen and that happened and this happened that led to that moment where that call was particularly impactful on them or something. And so like there isn't some equality of experience. Somebody might do, one thing and have no problems at all. Another person might, do the exact same thing and have a ton of problems. And I don't necessarily know if that means that one person's like much weaker or stronger. It's just like, because those same two people could have went to a different call and the other one had the problem, the other one didn't, right? It's like, it's not equal.
It's not, and it is bizarre right now. Exact same thing in the military, right? And I'm not proud to say this, but I used to have the exact same thoughts, and like pick your example. I'd be like, what the fuck is his problem? Like, you know what I mean? Like that was a walk in the park, right? And then you start to really, once again, to your point, you have no idea. Like everyone's meter is going to get pegged numerous times throughout the course of, law enforcement, first responders, military. Like maybe that was just the 100th time his meter got pegged, and that's his limit. You know what I mean? That's his limit, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? Maybe mine's 90, maybe mine's 200. Right? Yeah. Like it's you just never know.
And I mean, in to play the devil's advocate to that, whole thing is like, I do believe that there are people that are better suited to career fields, right?
Sure.
Like, I think that my mom couldn't work in the ER, right? She would implode because the drama is too much, and that's okay. Love her to death. She's a great person. She can do a whole lot of things, but like put certain people in certain places, they aren't built for it. But even if you put the right person in the right place, if a certain thing happens, they're not immune to the response, right? You could be the most equipped person ever, and if you get the thing that happens to link up with the thing that happened when you were 15 and when you were 6, you're done, right? Game over, right? Because you're just a sum of your parts. And I think that I didn't have a lot of touch to that prior to like going to treatment. I didn't have like this idea that like that whole parts theory of, a certain part of your existence is like not your choice, right? You just
Right.
experienced these things and they made you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a lot of grace to the world. Like even like, you know, you deal with kind of shitty people and you're like, man, I now, my wife used to, God love her, she's the best. She used to always, we had like someone like cut us off in traffic. She'd be like, oh, maybe they're having a baby, right? Like she's just like, you know, we don't know their story, right? And that was kind of her like cliche she would say. And I used to be kind of annoyed by it, like, no, that guy sucks. I hate him, right?
Yeah, you're like,
run him off the road.
Right.
But now I'm much more like, you know, I don't know what's going on. And that person that like was an asshole at the grocery store, it's probably much more a reflection on them and the day they're having and the week they're having than it is anything to do with me.
Right.
Like the likelihood that it is about me
is pretty slim.
Pretty low.
Pretty
and
slim.
like and that really opens up this whole like world to view when you realize that most people are more influenced by their own experience than by you interacting with them.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah. And I can relate. Like when I came back from Mexico, you know, and before I went down there, you know, it's like if, you know, just borderline enraged, at least internally. You know, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're just always hovering around like an 8 or a 9, right?
Yeah.
And in anything that happens, you just immediately to a 10, right? And coming out of that experience, it was like, one, now I'm at a 0. And it's going to, you know, unless you set me on fire, you know what I mean? Like it's my perception and the only thing I have control over is how I perceive or how I let things affect me. And once you realize that that's really the only thing I have control over is how I react to what I'm perceiving, that's a calmness and like a power, so to speak, that I think is, I think we're saying the same thing, right? Like, because perfect example, right? Like somebody cut you off and before the treatment, I would have, you know, lost my shit. It'll ruin my day, right?
Yeah.
After the treatment, I was like, yeah, I want to say I jumped and maybe they're having a baby, but it's like, oh, maybe they got to use the restroom, you know, they didn't do, you know, I don't know. It was just a calmness that came along with that new perspective.
Yeah. And like one of the things they talked about in treatment that I've really taken is like this idea that like looking back is depression and looking forward is anxiety. Right? So like
interesting way to put it.
Whenever you're feeling those emotions, like unless you're mindful in the moment, like those emotions are telling you something, right? So they're not your enemy, like they're your friend. They're like guiding you into like what experience you're having, right? So like just because an emotion exists doesn't mean it controls you. It just is telling you a story, right? But that ability to be mindful and in the moment is so important and so often lost because everyone's so worried about like, well, that person screwed me over last week, or I had this experience in my life, or what's going to happen next week. I hope it works out, that they like forget to just like be right now. And like, that was probably my biggest takeaway from treatment entirely. Obviously, like the CPT work I did to like kind of work through some of the negative self-talk and like kind of stuff was huge. But then the ability to just be like, man, I really don't care about what happened yesterday, and I don't really care what's going to happen tomorrow. I just want to like be here and hang out with my guys and you know, be right now.
1,000%, dude. Are you familiar with Alan Watts? Have you ever listened to?
No.
So yeah, check him out for sure. He's one of my favorites. Philosopher, basically very stoic. He's got a lot. Obviously, he's passed away quite some time ago. And a lot of his lectures are online. I think you would enjoy them. But one of the things he says, he has several quotes. You know, everything I think he says is quotable. But one of them is, no amount of anxiety has any effect over what is going to happen. Zero. I mean, you know, whether you're flatlined or absolutely screwing yourself into the ceiling at a level 10, what is going to happen is what is going to happen. You know, and so when I say I leaned on him, like I listened to him intently and religiously after I left Mexico. So I highly encourage it. I think you'd really enjoy him.
When you left Mexico, how did you feel like that treatment had a lot of staying power? Like,
so yeah, I attribute it to like when somebody asks that question, I always, to me, it's like reverse alcoholism, right? Or what I would assume, you know, that is the longer that an alcoholic goes without a drink, I would assume that theoretically, the longer away from that last drink he gets, the easier it is to to realize that that doesn't serve him, right? Him or her, right?
Yeah.
For me, the longer I get away from that specific moment, sometimes, and it's been several years at this point, the harder it is to kind of reach back and touch that. And so it's and that, you know, the treatment using psychedelics, like, it is by no means, and I don't think any therapy or treatment or recovery program is, like you said, like it's not an easy button fix. It's like, I'm not going to go do this and then Wally Kazam, it's just everything is sunshine and rainbows for the rest of my life. That's not reality. But it does give you tools, right? It does give you tools to kind of process and maintain perspective, right? The best way that I had it explained to me was like, if your life and your habits and your daily choices are a record, and you know a record player, like a music record, and the needle is your brain, right? And so it's been playing the same song, you know, for better or for worse, right, for a long time, right? And what that treatment does is it lifts the needle, right? And so, or I would equate it to, there's a lot of static and a lot of noise, right? And it kind of turns that white noise off, and so you're calm and you're quiet. And that's the medicine doing what the medicine is supposed to do, right? And whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you know, as kind of the average, what they call honeymoon phase, that needle is going to come back down. And it's up to you in your choices, in your daily habits, in the tools, using the tools that they give you. It's your decision whether that comes down playing the same song it did when it left, right? So that was a very good way that it was explained to me, and it was like, oh, okay, so I have, because a lot of that despair and that depression and that anxiety is you feel like a lack of control, right? And there's one thing that we we want control, right? We crave it. We think we, you know, and I think that for me in particular, that treatment and that experimental treatment showed me that there's really very few things that I have actual control over. That's how I perceive things and basically my reaction to those perceptions, right? And as long as I'm only focused on controlling those two things and being mindful of how, if I'm controlling or if I'm not controlling those things, then I'm in a really, really good spot, right? When you don't control those two things, you kind of start to get out over your skis, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes back down to, like, you know, the serenity prayer, which is like, you know, recognizing the things you can and cannot control, and like, you know, only focusing on the things you can control and letting go of the things you can't, right? Which is truly where the serenity lies, right? Which is, you know, so much energy is wasted in trying to control the things that are uncontrollable.
100%.
And that letting go, which is hard. It's really hard, like, especially like you were saying, like, we desperately want to control things, but the reality is that, like, the vast majority of the world is uncontrollable.
Completely uncontrollable. Yeah, you control almost nothing.
But you always have the option to control your reaction.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Which is huge.
Yeah.
To recognize.
It's much easier to solve 1 or 2 problems at a time than it is a million.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know? Well, you look fantastic. How your recovery is going great.
Yeah, I mean the.
And I say recovery, I'm not.
No. I mean that's what it is. The reality is like, that was one thing that I felt a lot of despair about, which was the idea that why can't I get fixed? Like, I want to feel better. Why can't I just, like, be fixed? And then the reality is that, like, you don't get that, right? Unfortunately, that's not the way it works, right? You get to, like, get to a good spot, and then you have to work your ass off to stay there, right? And that's the actual truth of, like, treatment and, like, mental health, you know, maintenance, which is, it is a maintenance program. It's not like a, you know, you don't get to go fix the ding in the bumper. You have to, like, maintain the whole car, right?
Right.
Because, yeah, so, like, but once you accept that as, like, oh, this is now just part of my life, there's a lot of, like, peace in the idea that, oh, okay, now I'm just doing this. This is part of existence, right? And I'm not disappointed anymore by the idea that I didn't just, like, you know, magically be renewed and I'm great forever, right?
Well, what's one thing that you would say to your teammates or the audience? And obviously we have a large audience contingent of military first responders, civilians as well. What's one thing that you would say if you had one piece of advice? And I know you use your platform. We're going to definitely get into that. Like, what's one thing you would say to anybody out there that's listening to this that's, in kind of that what we'll call the spiral phase?
It's so hard to start the process, but once you get that first step, it gets so much easier, which is like they talk about the 10,000 pound phone, right? Which is like that first call is the hardest thing to do. The first person you notify that I'm not doing so hot, it really does get exponentially easier after that first one, but it certainly doesn't feel like it.
Yeah,
it feels like the whole world's going to implode the second I pick up the phone. And the reality is that like it is hard. It's so hard. Like the phone is so heavy that admittance of not being okay officially, right? Some people in your inner circle might know or whatever, but like when it finally goes public, it's hard.
Yeah.
But it gets so much easier and only gets easier. And now like the fact that you can sit here on this podcast or I do it on mine and just talk about like the struggles and how things aren't always easy. And, and now it's not a problem at all. But 2 years ago, you probably wouldn't have caught me on a podcast talking about like being sad, right? That wouldn't be cool.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that's not rad at all. Yeah.
And the reality is like, it's really odd because like you would think, well, how could you ever be suicidal if you weren't sad? And I'd never really felt that sad, like not like traditionally like frowny face sad. It was more like, I don't want to feel this way, whatever that felt. I don't want to like the prevailing thought that I remember having was like, I don't want to die, but I don't want to exist. Right.
I can relate. Yes.
And I don't even know. Cause like I wasn't strictly suicidal in the way they call it passively suicidal in like the treatment world. Right. Which was the idea that I don't have a plan or motive or intent, but I also really desperately don't want to be alive.
Yeah.
Right. So it was that it's a weird thing because you would expect it to be like, oh, I'm so sad. But it was just like, no, being alive is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's well, because I think you forget. I think we, and it's not just one event. It could be one event, but it's a series of events, and it's that rut, that negative loop cycle, a series of probably unhealthy and bad habits, compiled with trauma, and whatever that is, and you forget what it's like to feel good. Like it's a completely foreign concept. You know what I'm saying? Like you always, I would say like myself, like I teetered between, okay and I'm fine and this sucks.
Yeah.
It was never I'm great.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
And I think that was a really weird experience for me. Like, and it almost became a problem because I was in treatment and I was like, I love this place. I never want to leave, right? Meanwhile, I have 2 kids and a wife that I adore at home. And I'm like, this blissful experience of being somewhere where I can be totally open and free with zero judgment and like zero expectations of who I'm supposed to be. I remember towards the end, I felt like I was just being like ripped apart. Like in the best way I could equate it would be like, in a zombie movie where like this guy's getting torn apart by all the zombies. Like, everyone in my life wants a piece. Like you want me to send this email back to you and you want me to like do this thing and everyone just wants a piece of me. And that was one of the things that was so deeply uncomfortable was that like, I didn't feel like I had any relationships where someone just wanted me to be there for the sake of me.
Yeah, it's a bad spot to be in.
Right. And everyone, and it was like, and it's so unfair looking back in retrospect because like, my wife is like the greatest thing that ever happened to me, right? Like she like has been with me since the jump when nobody wanted me. Like when we talk about like, and I was talking about I had a pretty rough go in high school. Like I didn't have a lot of like friends and like I was kind of on the outcast and like, I had this great scheme to manage the girls basketball team in high school. And I ultimately met my wife through that. but she chose me out of the pack, and like she shouldn't have. Like she bought low. She bought really low, right? Really super low, and it's worked out.
Buckle up, it's gonna be a ride.
I'm definitely like it's been quite a glow up, I think. But you know, I'm so grateful that she took a chance on me, and I wouldn't be. You know, I'd probably be in jail or like definitely in a much less advantageous life circumstance if it wasn't for her.
It's funny how often, you know, guys like us, and or you know everybody for you know if the relationship is strong is how much hot water they keep us out of.
Oh my gosh,
you know what I mean?
Insane.
Like there was a significant. We just celebrated 25 years this last October, and which definitely a statistical anomaly, right? And there are significant periods of where I was not a peach. Oh, to put it lightly.
Yeah. Oh, you know? I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, yeah, we just did 10. We just passed 10 in July.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And it's been hard.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know. It is work. Like being married is work. And, you know, I don't think I would want to be married to me.
Oh, God.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the reality is my wife is an angel, right? She puts up with so much shit.
1,000%.
And like, I'm so grateful to have her. And like, I mean, I couldn't, you know, the truth is like, we started dating in high school and like, I lived with my parents and I lived with my wife. And like, I don't know a life other than that. Like if she were to leave me, I would be like Tom Hanks on the island. Yeah. Like I would be like, fire, right? You know, like I have no way to be an adult without my life. And it's not really like that codependent as that might sound, but like truthfully, I've never been an adult or a person without my wife, right? And she's the best.
And I totally like Jennifer and I's experience is a little bit different because we were both in the Marine Corps and the GWAT obviously, you know, did nothing. Nothing in a positive, so to speak, for the relationship. So we were separated quite a bit, right? And there was because I was leaning into with maximum effort everything else, right? It was easy to kind of put her and the kids on a back burner and things that, you know, once again that experimental treatment that I went through kind of showed me like how wrong that was, right? That is not the correct course of action, right? And so I went from kind of out of sight, out of mind to now they better bury us in the same casket. Yeah. Because I can't fathom, you know what I'm saying? For sure. You know, being separated at all. And so, yeah, man, it's, I hope I get to meet her someday.
Yeah. Yeah. She's the best. Like, I mean, so she's a pediatric ICU nurse. She's so smart. She's beautiful. Like, I literally am like, what is good? Like, I feel like I won this lottery or something, some weird thing. And she puts up with all my shit. Like, what the hell how have I done this? Right. But yeah, it's just like I have not made her life easy.
Sure.
And she is still so fiercely loyal and like loving. And it's, you know, yeah, it's just like you couldn't ask. And like, it's so hard to be married to a firefighter. I mean, just the same way as military, right? Like, I'm gone. Like, I guarantee you, for the next 30 years, I'm going to be gone 1/3 of our life. Right. It's like committing to a long distance relationship in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, and you're not working at a petting zoo. It's a dangerous job.
Yeah. And so, you know, even to hang into that, like just agree to that, those terms is crazy enough. But then let alone you have to deal with my, you know, now I'm training and teaching and traveling all the time and doing all this stuff. It's like, you know, this is a not easy life, and she does it very amazingly.
Yeah, because even when we get ourselves on the right track and we're making good choices and we're still idiots.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the best case scenario is not super great, right? Yeah. Like I could be much better than I've been, but I still am not like, she deserves better.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is
shout out to her. Like I said, I can't. Well, so obviously you know, having the saves and being a role model in that sense, right? For and for all the right reasons. And then how much of the role have you, after you made the decision to go seek help, did you have found that setting that example, have people opened up and said, you know, hey, if Jake can do it, then maybe I should too? You know, is there,
I've definitely had way more conversations than I ever would have thought I would with people.
Exactly.
I mean, so much so that like I'm talking to this guy who lives in New York who's considering going to treatment. I'm talking to this guy who lives in California. Like this guy knows me from the podcast, or that guy knows from here. It's like, and all of a sudden, like, hey, can you talk to my buddy about this? And like I have said from the very beginning, and I will stand for it forever, that like this is now like on the life's mission thing. It's like whenever the phone rings, I'm going to answer. I'm always going to be willing to have the conversation of what treatment did for me and why I think that someone that's struggling should go. And so like my phone is quite literally like 100% I will always answer the phone.
Good.
It's just because like I don't know if I would be like, I was resisting the idea of like killing myself really well, but I don't know without treatment if I would have resisted it forever. Right. And so a lot of ways I consider treatment saving my life. Right. And so yeah, I feel like I need to pay it forward and like heavily advocate for it. And even at the expense of like, I'm sure there's people that talk shit. Like, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Sure. Oh,
right?
yeah.
I'm sure. It's fine.
Yeah.
I don't. And, you know, the reality is that the vast majority, say, I don't know, 99 out of 100 people probably think that I went to treatment for XYZ reason. And, like, they're not even right? They might have you know, I mean, obviously doing a podcast like this, talking about, like, you know, the pressures that came on the backside of all this fanfare and stuff is, you know, a way more accurate, you know, depiction of why I did what I did. But it never was like nightmares to do with calls or like, and that's not to diminish that. I think people have that experience and it's totally valid. But that was never my story. My story was like, I didn't like myself. And all of a sudden I had to come face to face with the idea that, you know, that's not a sustainable trajectory to dislike yourself forever, right?
And it can be sticky too, right? Because you come on an experience like that was overwhelmingly positive, and your natural instinct is to want to talk about it and right and like so. And I did the same thing with mine when I came out. I'm like, I wanted to be like, no questions, just go do it, right? And I was like coming at and saying, hey, but you know what you should do is, you know what I mean? Well, I wouldn't come at it from that because I'm not telling anybody what to do. I always joke and say, hey, man, I'm nobody's guidebook to shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. But if you ask me, I'll tell you what it did for me. I'll tell you all the positives that it did for me. I am by no means telling anybody what to do. Highly recommend it. If you're even thinking about it, then it's something that you should lean into, right? Because why not? You know what I mean? But yeah, it was such an overwhelmingly positive experience. You know, you just naturally want to share that.
Proselytize, right? Like that's a reality. And like that's been kind of my take, which is this idea of if you're considering it, you probably should do it. Because you wouldn't be considering it if it wasn't probably a thing to do. Right? Nobody that's doing great is considering going to treatment. Right? If you're considering it, there's what I hate that I love his advice so much because he's one of my best friends, but it's literally one of my best friends. He gave me this advice and I literally make decisions based off, and I'll even touch on one of the kind of pinnacle decisions based off of this, but it's the idea of like, if you're ever faced with a decision, the hardest option is the best one.
Sure. The obstacle is the way.
Right. Which is, you know, if you're considering it and it's harder, you're clearly subconsciously considering it because you know it's the best, right? And so like that brings me down to my decision to go to treatment, which was, I remember like very distinctly, like really having like a full bore panic attack, like crying, throwing up, like, and being like, I'm gonna kill myself. And then being like, it's harder to stay alive.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
And that advice, like literally probably saved my life, which was the idea of in that moment, having the presence of mind to go, what's the harder thing to do? Is it harder to go end it? Or is it harder to stay alive and battle the demons or whatever?
Stay in the fight.
Right?
Yep, 100% stay in the fight. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, did you, because let's transition to your show, right? I want to talk about your show. Did you immediately start talking about the process and what you went through on your show?
No, so I'd made the decision to go on a Thursday, and by the next Thursday I was on the East Coast there. I didn't even have the opportunity to. I posted like a thing on my Instagram that was basically like, I'm going to be gone for a while.
I remember it.
Yeah,
I remember seeing
like,
it. Yeah.
like deuces, I'm out of here, right? And that was it. And then I posted a couple times while I was in treatment, like update. I finally had to have a beard for the first time in my life, which was kind of fun. But then I was gone. And then once I came back from treatment, 40 days later, I think I might have taken a week off. And then I did a podcast called Rehab Ramblings when I kind of told the story. And like, this is how I got here. This is what my experience was. And that was the first time I really went public with it. And prior to that, like on my show, I had tons of guests of, mental health people, and I had a suicidologist, and I had, and this was just like, a part of me feels indebted to like advocate for things just for the sake of my brother, right? It's like, hey, I need to like normalize the conversations for suicide and mental health awareness, just I'm on behalf of Travis, but, so there was already a through line in the show of like mental health awareness and all this stuff, but I don't think anyone saw it coming for me to just like go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody knew. I mean, I remember, like I said, people were going, you sure you'll be able to maintain this pace? But I think, at least at the time, I was inferring that as like, man, these people think I'm working really hard. Like I'm such a hard worker, right? Like, right? Not realizing that, these people are clearly recognizing that I'm not okay, right? Right? They're not seeing it as hard work. They're seeing it as like a person struggling, right?
Right.
And, yeah, so then we come back and then, I put out that show, which was, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes of me just like talking, which was a little bit odd. That was one of the first times I ever released a show with just me just talking, tell the story about going to rehab and the positive experience it was. And then we've kind of been back. I had a couple episodes. Right now I'm on a hiatus. I took like, I don't know, I'll probably take a month and a half off before I'm starting quote unquote season 2 of Hazard Class. Tell
the audience all about it.
As we backlog, right? So I talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show. I did another solo pod and just talked about, I had banked a bunch of episodes prior to going to rehab. And so like I would record an episode and it wouldn't come out for maybe, 6 weeks or something. And then all of a sudden I get back and that's all gone because I, released all those episodes. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, now I have to record an episode every week or I won't have an episode for next week, right? And that's was like way stressful. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to take off a month, bank a bunch of episodes, and then I won't have that like running clock of stress.
Sure.
So that's where we're at right now. So I have a bunch of episodes. I could be releasing them every week, but probably either next week or the week after that, depending on how the schedule works out, I'll start releasing them again.
Awesome.
But yeah, so the show is, I kind of playfully call it, Joe Rogan for the fire service because it really is kind of an eclectic mix. Everything from, filmmakers to authors to firefighters to people that are technical experts in, some firefighting field. We had you on, we've had other military people on, sleep specialists, and
it's very educational. It's extremely informative.
Yeah, and I've really tried to make it about the guests, right? Like I am. It's funny when I come do shows like this, like I finally talk about myself because generally on the podcast I don't really talk about myself. It's really a matter of like, letting the guests go because I consider them much more interesting than myself.
Right.
But yeah, it's been, we were talking about it earlier, which is like the podcast is such a privilege to just have conversations with interesting people. Like there'd be no catalyst to like have some of these conversations. I mean, maybe you're sitting in a bar and, have a conversation over a drink or something like that. But, most of these people I would never talk to.
No,
right?
Of course
and
not.
so all of a sudden it's like, wow, I get to absorb all this knowledge and have all this like informal mentorship from these people that are interesting and had amazing life experiences. And, even if I wasn't doing it for work, getting a paycheck to do the podcast, I would still love to do it. It's amazing. It's like such a privilege.
It is. It's incredibly rewarding, right? And it's because I echo everything you just said, right? And I haven't been around as long as you, but it is fascinating what, even if I'm interviewing somebody that I know well, inevitably there's always going to be something that I may have known that individual my entire life, right? And there are going to be boatloads of shit that I never knew, right? Because you never have like, how often do you have an hour, 2, 3+ hours just uninterrupted, no cell phones, no anything, just pure conversation, organic conversation, right? And yeah, it's extremely rewarding in that sense.
Yeah, and you're even doing something beyond me, right? You're these long form episodes are, the place where true, like, deep level, no, holds bar conversations happen, because there's no way to hide in a 2 hour, 3 hour long podcast, right? Like I mean, I have done super long ones, but generally my episodes are, 30 minutes to an hour, which is you can still dive deep, but it's not like this long form thing, which is really great. But yeah, it's the podcast is fun, man. And like, so I work for a company called the Hazmat Guys out of New York City. They're 2 retired FD&Y guys.
Awesome.
That work in the hazmat company. And so they're both retired now. They started this training business and started a podcast because there wasn't a hazardous materials podcast. And so they started doing that, 10 years ago now. And ironically, I'm a hazmat specialist. Like, I work in the hazmat company in St. Paul. I'm one of like the coordinators for the city. I teach for the state of Minnesota. I teach all across the country. But when I was learning, I was listening to their podcast. Like, that's how I learned all my stuff.
No kidding.
And so all of a sudden, I'm at a conference and I'm sitting in the back room of literally one of the classes from now one of my buddies, Bob. And I see on LinkedIn, obviously I always tell the story and Bob gives me grief because he's like, wait, you're on your phone during my class?
Yeah.
I was scrolling LinkedIn and I saw that they were posting for a social media manager. And I had worked in marketing for T-Mobile a little bit. I did fairly well in sales, and then I moved to marketing. And so I was like, I got a little bit of marketing. At this time, I literally did not have a social media page.
I remember you saying
that.
Yeah,
I literally did not. And I was like, but I think I know marketing, so I can do this. And so I wrote them a cover letter. I applied for this job, and I wrote them a cover letter. It basically said, like, you don't have to pay me. Let me prove that I can do this, and then we'll talk about, like, what I'm worth, right? And they took a flyer on me, and they hired me to, like, manage their social media or, like, be this, like, external voice. And within a couple months, they had, like, now I'm running their social media and their online learning platform, and I'm, like, one of the core members of this team talking to these guys on a daily basis. And it's so bizarre because, like, I literally wouldn't be who I am without the education that they gave me. And now I'm, like, working hand in hand with them, which is so bizarre. And so anyways, I come on working with the Hazmat Guys. We're doing that for a while. And then, we're in discussions about these shows, and they're going to launch these kind of subsidiary shows and have this whole umbrella of shows. And I'm like, we should do, like, what about this? Like, we're strictly in the hazmat space right now, but what if we had just, like, an emergency response podcast that talks to everyone, and from law enforcement to military to fire to hazmat to whatever.
It's like an online think tank, or right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and so then we're like, yeah, let's do it. And so I started Hazard Class, and we're a year in now, 40 some episodes recorded or published, but probably 50 some episodes recorded. And we're learning every day. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. Every episode you try to make it a little bit better. But more than anything, it's just like, what a rewarding experience to have these conversations with these people that are super interesting. And yeah, it's been such a privilege. And it's a lot of work. Like, it definitely is that. But
yeah, you almost, unless you've done it, you have no idea how much actual work it is.
Yeah, no, it seems so simple. Like, oh, you just sit in a room and you have these microphones and you just talk. And you're like, well, I mean, kind of. That's the easy part. Like, that's the really enjoyable, easy part. And then there's all this back end work to make it actually a thing. Otherwise you're just shouting into the void. But and so now I'm working with the Hazmat Guys, managing this podcast is part of my job there, basically. Like, I manage Hazard Class and run Hazard Class all by myself as a part of the Hazmat Guys. But now we just, like, launched a game. We're having a conference. We're training all across the country. There's almost 30 instructors that work for the company that teach every week. And
very cool.
We're busy. And it's fun, it's a part of, it feels like I'm, part of something big, and it's growing, and I can't imagine. It just feels so surreal. From, like, a guy that used to listen to this podcast and, like, think these guys were, like, the coolest people of all. And now I still think they're pretty cool, but now I know them on a first name basis. And it's been a really rewarding last 2 years, 3 years, or whatever.
Yeah, what's your 2, 3, 5 year plan? Where do you see yourself? What's the next on the horizon?
I'm trying to work less, which is not going well. That was one of my big kind of resolutions coming back from treatment was like,
find balance.
Yeah. Office hours, stuff like that. And I'm doing better than I ever have been, but I'm still probably work too much, I would say. But so trying to find that balance and, getting a voice that's impactful, obviously, trying to advocate for the right messages and have the right conversations, especially when I think about the podcast. It's like, I want to put out high quality content that is impactful, not just like fluff. And I want to have meaningful conversations and learn. And really the approach I've taken is like, how selfish can I be in these conversations? Like, who do I really want to talk to and who do I really want to absorb information from? And then the audience is really tertiary to that, right? If I get a lot out of it, they will probably get a lot out of it too.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right? And so I don't really make very many decisions on the podcast based off of what I think the audience will like. And that maybe that's a terrible plan. I don't know. But to me, it's very much like solitary. Who do I want to talk to and why do I want to talk to them? And now this like has led me down this whole track record of these upcoming guests of like, I'm talking to a medium, which is like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm talking to a medium. Okay, cool. Maybe it's going to be awesome. Maybe it's going to be insane. I don't know.
Yeah.
My mom's really concerned about it. She's not super thrilled that I'm talking to a medium. But
Gonna unlock some Pandora's box.
Yeah. But like, it started out very strictly like I'm going to talk to people about like this career field with this thing. And then I'm like, I'm just like a 33-year-old fireman that has interests and I want to talk to them. And I think that most of us are pretty similar. So if I think it's interesting, somebody else will probably think it's interesting too. And
oh, for sure.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like where I'm at with the podcast, at least. And then in terms of global domination with the hazmat guys, it's just, we're entering the conference space here in February 3rd through the 5th. We're hosting our first ever conference in the Keys, Florida Keys, which will be super cool. And then, from there it's onward and upward. I think we're going to try to host more podcast or more conferences every year. And it's just this whole thing, right? We went from a podcast to a training company now to like, this media company, which we have like all these other shows that are growing underneath. And it's a lot. And, it's a part-time job technically, but it doesn't feel like a part-time job very often. You're working 56 hours a week at the fire department. That's without overtime, which, is fairly frequent. And then you sprinkle on, and then that doesn't even count like my actual business. Like I have a training company, Hazard Class, right? All rolls into that same thing where I'm teaching like in industry, I'm teaching HazWhopper classes to, the dairy business. Next week, I think I'm teaching at a pharmaceutical company, their HazWhopper training. And so traveling, doing that, it's a
lot, dude.
It is a lot, but it is a labor of love. Like I really do enjoy it. And like, especially in the hazmat space, like it's such a notoriously horrible subject to learn that like to do it in an engaging way that's not miserable is really rewarding because everyone just really comes in with the lowest expectations. Right? Yeah. They're like, oh, great, we get to learn about placarding today or whatever.
Sure.
And to be able to do it in a way that doesn't suck is pretty rewarding, right?
Without a doubt. And I watched, when I knew I was coming on yours, I watched a bunch of your episodes just to kind of get, okay, how does he conduct himself and so on and so forth. And other than the fact, one thing, other than the fact that I didn't completely understand everything that they were talking about, right? Because, it's completely outside of my wheelhouse. Yeah. One thing that was abundantly clear was like, you have a series of subject matter experts. And like I've said to other guests that have come on this show, like I may not know anything about the topic, but I recognize subject matter expertise when I see one. And then I'm instantly intrigued. Whether it's useful information to me or not, I just can't help but either consume or start asking a litany of questions. So, I think the show is fantastic in that aspect.
And I was talking to you earlier about there's really two derivatives of the show. It's known quantity, which is a person that's known to, the community. And then you go, well, who are you actually really? Like, what are your motivations? How did you become you? Why did you become you? And then there's the other sub who's like, I don't really care who you are, but what do you know? And like, how can we squeeze every last bit of juice out of like your brain? Right. So there's really two different shows. One is, where we're deep diving on who's the actual person. And the other one is like, tell me everything you know about XYZ subject. Right?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's
awesome.
Great. Well, tell everybody where they can find you. In all aspects. Tell
Okay.
the audience.
Yeah, so the hazmatguys.com will bring to the whole overarching umbrella of that empire, if you call it that. And then Hazard Class is on all the socials. If you want to Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. The vast majority of the interaction I'll do is through Instagram. And then in terms of the podcast, actually, it's literally everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podmatch, everywhere. Like if you search Hazard Class, it will be there. And then the videos on YouTube exclusively. I think we're going to be going. This would be a semi-announcement, I suppose, that we're going to be going to Spotify video here in the next, probably for 2026. We'll go.
Badass.
Which is a new thing, and we're excited for that. That's going to be a new change for. Not only Hazard Class, but for the Hazmat Guys. So that's kind of like a you heard it here first kind of thing.
Sick.
Yeah. And so, yeah, Hazard Class, it's a labor of love. And, I appreciate the audience that we've managed to build.
I am sincerely humbled. Thank you so much for coming on, dude. What an incredible story. I'm really glad that this happened.
Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough. This has been amazing. Let's do this again.
Yeah.
Right?
I appreciate it, dude. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Let's
absolutely.
do this again for sure. Keep me in the loop. Is there anything else you want to shout out before we get you fed?
No, I'm great, man. I appreciate the time to come down here, meet you, and hang out. And it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, dude, this has been awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, we'll on to the next adventure. We'll get out of here and get into some trouble.
Absolutely.
All right, brother. All right, everybody. Thank you, Jake. Thank you. All right. Stay mobile, guys. See ya.